So he was so open-minded. He was ready to listen to something that really was a bit off the wall for what you would expect at that point of that kind of movie. And, had that been some other director, they would have thrown that out after the first 20 seconds. Because you've got these guys running around this house and soldiers and screaming and all these crazy faces and blood and everything. And you've got this little tiny piano and a little strumming acoustic guitar. They'd have gone, what are you playing me? But because he is who he is, and he just watched it the whole way through, and he just had this big smile on his face, that he said, yeah, this has got to be it. You've cracked it.
You're listening to Music Dialogue. Hear the stories behind iconic theme songs, scores, and jingles directly from the composers and music supervisors who made them happen. In this episode, composer John Murphy recounts how an evening at a pub turned into his first job as composer on a film, which led him into a career working with directors like Danny Boyle, Guy Ritchie, and Michael Mann. He also tells the story behind his iconic pieces of film music from 28 Days Later and Sunshine that have gone on to be licensed countless times for movies, trailers, and advertisements.
I guess the very beginning was, my dad was a singer in a band, would do local clubs and pubs and stuff like that. I think he had one record out in the 60s, and so there was always guitars lying around, and there was always a drum kit and amplifiers and stuff. So I kind of grew up with all of this stuff in the kitchen. And I think at a certain point, I wanted to sort of hit one of these guitars, and, I must have been about 7 or 8. And so I plugged one of these things in, and I was just bashing the strings and turning the amplifier up. And it was just that moment of electricity, where you go, wow, this is like the coolest thing ever. It's just that feeling you get, an electric guitar is this magical thing. And so I think that was probably the moment where I really felt, not that I was going to be a musician, but I just got that feeling of like, this is really cool. And then I think probably a few years later, I was about 11 or something, I decided to just stop sort of learning, I was into the Beatles at the time, so I wanted to put a little band together. So I learned a few chords. I got my dad to show me some chords, and I learned a few songs, and I persuaded my best friend, who actually lived next door, weirdly enough, to, I sort of persuaded him to get a cheap bass for Christmas or something. So we get this little cheap Zenta bass, and I had this little guitar, and so we like play these Beatles songs and sing them really badly. And then, the way all great rock and roll bands kind of start, it was you're at school and then someone, has got a drum kit, or actually you only had like a snare drum and a cymbal. So like, you're in the band, you can be the drummer, that wonderful little evolution where, where everything's easy and exciting. So then, and then I met some other kid from school who played a bit of guitar, and then suddenly we had a band, and so we was like, well, let's just, we didn't even think we were ever going to like sort of play anywhere. We just thought this is the coolest thing in the world. So we started playing these Beatles songs, but we were kind of also into punk a bit. So we would play like Twist and Shout or something, but we'd play it at like 100 miles an hour, so it sounded like the Sex Pistols or something, so it was, and then we'd learn these songs, and then we'd play them in our own way, but everything was like really fast and really shit, to be honest, but it was awesome. And then we ended up, my dad got us some gigs in like the local pub, and I think I was about maybe 13 then. And that moment where you first play in front of people, by now the drummer actually had a full drum kit. He actually had a bass drum as well. So we had these tiny little amps, and we borrowed gear off my dad. We had 2 microphones, and I mean, everything was just, it was all cheap stuff, but it was awesome. And then we just started, that I remember that first gig like it was yesterday, and it was in an afternoon. It was, we got this like Sunday afternoon thing, and just playing in front of people was just the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me. And, from that point, it was like, this would be like the best job in the world. Imagine if you could spend your life playing pubs with your mates, I didn't think anything beyond anything. beyond that, So I did that for a few years, and then I really got into music like full time. Then I was, even though I was still at school, became this obsession. And I'd practice. I'd run home from school, and I'd like practice for hours in my bedroom, and I'd learn new chords, and the same thing we all go through, And after a bit, I think I was about 15 or 16. For whatever reason, I got a fretless bass when fretless basses were kind of cool, for like a year, because Japan were out and you had Mick Korn and all these guys. And I started getting asked to play on demos of some of the local bands who'd been signed. So I got to play on records, and then from that, you earn a little bit of money, and and then I think I was 16 or 17, and I got asked to go on tour with one of the bands from Liverpool who had just had a huge big hit. He'd had like a top 10 record, and I'd never even left Liverpool, never mind Britain. So I was like, let's go, I'll do it, So, and then I just toured for maybe about 6 or 7 years. Then I ended up going from one tour to another with another band, and it was like living the dream. It was just unbelievable. I ended up going like touring around Japan 5 or 6 times, and all over Europe and Scandinavia, and it was just amazing. But throughout that time, after a certain point, I ended up getting into writing my own stuff. So some of the records with these bands, I was being a session player for. I mean, I was never actually in the bands. I was just doing tours with them. I ended up co-writing some things, and then I ended up co-writing a few A-sides with some bands, and I really loved the writing more than anything, to be honest. Even though you kind of live in that rock and roll dream of being on tour and then going on another tour, there's only sort of so much, sort of porn that you can watch on a tour bus at 10 o'clock in the morning, before it gets before it gets tiring. You're just like, really, it's 10 o'clock, and the roadies are like, let's get this going. You're just like, really? So, the whole touring thing just sort of got on me a little bit, and I thought, well, maybe I should be writing music instead. And then I ended up meeting this guy in London who was making this low budget movie, and one thing led to another, and he asked me, we were just drunk in some bar somewhere, and he said, oh, this is cool, do you want to write some songs for this movie I'm trying to make? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And then we just forgot about it. I didn't speak to him for 6 months, and then I found out that actually he got the film made and he was shooting it. So I got back in touch and said, remember me, the guy at the Scouser you got drunk with in London? Still want me to write these songs. He said, oh, yeah, just send them in. But at this point, the film had got like kind of known amongst the publishers because for whatever reason. And so there was a lot of people writing like songs for this movie, trying to get in it, just like making demos. But, as luck would have it, the stuff that I'd written, these stupid little songs with a friend of mine, just kind of stuck with the director and the producer. So, me and Dave Hughes, who I was writing with at the time, we got the job for writing the songs for the movie. And then after about a month of doing this and everything was going great, the producer called me up and said, look, we love the songs, but we can't afford to hire a composer. Do you think you could write the score as well? And, so I was like about 25 or 26 at the time. So, you'd have that confidence at that age. And you just go, oh, yeah, no problem. We can write the score, So we said, that we could do it. And we went to London to meet them, and they told us how they wanted the music. And the funny thing is, as we come out the meeting, I mean, we didn't have a clue. We were just, noobs. We went into a bookshop next to where we'd met the producer and director. And we said, we better learn how to write a film score. Let's see if there's a book in here about film scores. And, it was on Charing Cross Road where all the film bookstores are. So they had stuff there, and there was a book called How to Write a Film Score, this old paperback. So we bought this book, me and Dave, and we said, we'll buy the book and then we'll read it on the train back to Liverpool. But we ended up just getting drunk on the train, and we didn't even read the book. In fact, we never read the book. But we did the score. And I mean, it was that beautiful moment where we knew so little. We were so clueless that we had no idea how clueless we were. We just thought, oh, this will be easy. What's this film score? It's just, it's a load of songs without singers. We'll just write. So what we did is we just wrote all these songs that were really just instrumentals. And we presented these little vignette things to the director and the producer, and they loved it because to them it felt really fresh and very, very, non-traditional. Because clearly we couldn't write a film score, but they didn't care. They thought it worked, and they were very happy to, just go with it. And then the movie came out. It was called Leon the Pig Farmer, the movie. And it won awards. It went to Venice. It went to Cannes. It won awards there. We even won awards for the music. And I think everybody got us wrong. I think they thought we were being very creative and very original. And we decided to, rewrite the idea of a conventional film score by writing these little pop songs, But we weren't. We were just being rubbish. So we got away with it. But from that movie, the director, the producer, and the writer went on to make their second movie each. So they've got suddenly you've got 3 other movies being made, and the nice thing was because that movie was their first movie too. They had no idea of what a real film composer was, so they just came back to us and said, "Oh, I'm doing another movie. Do you want to do it?" And we were like, "Okay, you sure?" And like, yeah, we love what you did on Leon. And then the producer did, "Oh, I'm making a movie. Do you want to do it?" So, out of nowhere, we were suddenly film composers, and which was just ridiculous. I mean, I was sort of living in a cellar at the time, and we were just like these 2 kids from Liverpool, So in the space of time we had before this next movie was going to hit, I think it was a horror film called Beyond Bedlam or something like that with Vadim Jean. We just spent that time watching loads of movies, and we had little notebooks, and we'd kind of watch all our favorite films and make notes and go, "Oh, scary music here. Oh, that's where you do chase music. Oh, it goes fast." We literally started from the absolute bottom, because neither of us are musically trained in any way. But from watching the movies that we loved, we really started to get a sensibility of what music did, even though we didn't know quite how to pull that off yet. We were getting that road sense, and that was critical. That, those few months of just completely, thinking about how music works to picture and how it works the story. And it was just it was mind blowing for me. It was like, I started seeing things I'd never seen before. I was hearing things I'd never heard before. And I started to understand, what it was all about. And then we had the Baptism of Fire. We did the 3 movies after that back to back. And by that time we were starting to understand, how it all worked. But it was funny. We were that clueless. We'd say things like, we'd call the editor and go, "What's a Simpty? We keep hearing Simpties. Do we need to buy a Simpty?" So, I remember this editor was like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
What are you guys doing on a movie?" We're like, "We haven't got a Simpty. Where do we get one?" Go, no, Simpty means oh, okay. So every day we'd ask these stupid questions, we really didn't know what we were doing. But we worked hard, and we had good ideas, and we came at everything fresh. And then from that point, you're just trying to stay on the saddle. And, I think I've been like that to this point. If I'm really honest, it's like every movie you do, you go, "Oh my God, how come, how could I have done these movies without knowing what I've just learned now?"
Yeah.
And even to this day, every film is different. Every director's different. And you learn stuff and you're like, oh my God, how did I not know that before? So it's been pretty much, completely fluking it to begin with, complete luck. And then, smiling a lot and working hard and just, trying to be original as well. I mean, that was always our thing. the beginning was, we're never going to sound like John Williams and we're never going to sound like Hans Zimmer. So what do we want to sound like, And even though Dave and I split up quite early on and I went alone from, I think 98 or 99, I sort of tried to keep that sort of ethos of know what you're good at, but also know what you're not trained to be. And so I never tried to sound like any of the big guys because I wouldn't have known how to be honest. It was easier for me to just go at things and do things my own way, and in the end, that really works for you, or it worked for me anyway. Because you then become good at what you are. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's the biggest bit of advice, whenever I have to talk to kids who are starting off, and and you see these, I do these talks sometimes, and they're all fresh faced, and they did all this hope, and you can see them right at the beginning. It's beautiful to see. I always try to stress, learn everything you can, listen to everybody, take it all in, but at every opportunity, when you can, because you can't always do your own thing, but when you can, put yourself in it. Make sure that your DNA of what you are, that makes you unique, whatever that may be, make sure you're trying to put it in there, because eventually that will be your sound. That will be your thing, and just be best at what you are. Be the best version of a film composer that you are. Don't try and copy John Williams or Hans or Danny Elfman. Those guys are there. None of those guys tried to copy somebody else. They did their own thing. And I really feel like, for me in particular, that I wouldn't have survived otherwise. There's better arrangers out there. There's much better orchestrators. There's, for me, I think, I was forced to do things my own way. And eventually the tide turns, and people come to you because of what you do, and they come to you because you do it in a way that nobody else does. So, that was, that would always be my biggest, there's no secret to any of this, there's no secret to success or anything like that, apart from try and be yourself and work as hard as you can. And that's, that's never left me, to be honest.
So between the years from when you got that first film towards the late 90s, you started working with Guy Ritchie on Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch. How would you say you got prepared to move up to that caliber, and or were you? Did you feel that you actually were prepared?
No, I never feel prepared. I mean, well, it wasn't. I mean, the funny thing is, Lock, Stock was the film that broke Guy. But the reality at the time was they weren't even sure that the film was going to come out. I mean, I remember reading the script and I thought it was the funniest script I'd ever read. I even remember telling Guy that the script is great, but you've got to change that title. That's the crappiest title of a film I've ever heard. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. It's like, it's so clunky to even say. Thank God he didn't change it. But when I started that, and it was such a low budget film. I mean, there was no money for anybody. It was just, if you want to do it, we really like you, just go for it. But I remember when it was even finished that they still didn't have even a sales agent, I think. They certainly didn't have any distribution. They had no guarantee of a theatrical release. So no one really felt that it was a big movie. I mean, we loved it. I mean, I loved the movie because I love that kind of thing. And Guy knew he'd made something great and he'd made something original, but there was never a feeling of like, oh, here's a big movie, I better be ready, because it just, if anything, it felt like the one film that wasn't going to come out, even though we loved it. So there was no gearing up for it. I mean, the best thing for me in that movie was that, I got to do, again, that thing where, Guy was very much like, here are the songs, use these as a sensibility sort of reference. and just do what you think, which is, it's the greatest compliment any director can give you, is where they say, you know, feel it out and just do what you think. Because, we all hate being told, oh, this has got to be strings. We need taikos here. Great directors don't do that, they don't pigeonhole you into certain things. And Guy very much gave me, a lot of leeway to sort of go at it in whatever way I thought was good, and then to just see what happened. So I got to mess around with, doing things all very lo-fi, and it was, had a kind of blaxploitation vibe in it, and it was very eclectic. There was little bits of score in there. It was a fun score. It was really a very easy film to score. But yeah, there was no gearing up that it was a big movie. It was only when it came out and it kind of exploded. I mean, in England it was huge. But the fact that it got to Sundance and got a lot of great reviews in America, that was a huge break for us. But it never felt that it was stepping up. I always loved the movie, but it didn't feel like it was a big step up, because it was just the same old.
Yeah.
Get paid no money, get on with it and try, and just do what you do. By Snatch, it felt like a little bit of a step up, because, Guy was already famous and cool by then. And obviously we had like Brad Pitt in it. It was like the biggest star that had ever been in a movie that I'd worked on. So that felt like a step up, but, I was ready by then.
Yeah.
And I'd work with Guy. I mean, Guy's like really easy to work with. He's, he's a man of few words, but he's always very sure of what he wants and what he doesn't like. So you just got to do and throw it at him. And, there's no over-explaining stuff with him. He's very to the point. So, he was great to work with.
In 2002, you scored the Danny Boyle film 28 Days Later. One of the cues from the score, titled In the House in a Heartbeat, has gone on to be used in lots of other films and trailers, and even covered by some other bands. I was in high school when this movie came out, and that specific cue is actually, kind of what got me interested in film music.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about it that's just sticks in your brain. Can you tell the story behind creating the cue, and if there was any inspiration behind it, or if it was just something that you made and
well,
it had a life of its own?
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, the funny story to that, it was probably upset a lot of kind of film or zombie fans here, but it was actually a song that I'd written a few years earlier.
Yeah, that's actually, I was curious if it was, because when I've researched it, it seems like maybe it was a song beforehand.
It was a song called Liar, I think, and it was me trying to be, Nirvana or something. I was trying to write this big 10-minute song of this ranting vocal that just got crazier and crazier, But yeah, that's what it was. So I had this. I mean, I'd written loads of songs and bits and pieces. I had all these things everywhere. But I'd kind of forgotten about it. I thought I'll come back to that one day and I'll, mix it properly and whatever. But I liked it. I remembered it had that sort of incessant energy, and it was building and building and building. And then when I came to score 28 Days Later, I did a really stupid thing, which I've never done again, which was I kind of tried to score it chronologically, which sounds like a good idea, but it's actually the dumbest thing you can do if you're scoring a movie, which meant that the most important cue in the film was kind of left till the very, very end, right? Which is, there's any other, young film composers out there, don't ever do that. Just do your themes first, sub-themes next, featured cues next, and then you work till you underscore at the end. And the reason for that is, well, there's a lot of reasons for doing it that way, but, usually by the time you get to the end of a movie, you're just in a puddle, you're just a mess, so you certainly don't leave your most important scene till you're, on your knees. And at this point in 28 Days Later, I'd got right to the end. It had gone great, but I knew I had this big scene to do at the end. And I was burnt out, I was really I'd thrown everything at it, and I had this big cloud looming over me of this big end scene. So anyway, I sort of threw myself at it. and I'd written something, which was just, I mean, it was okay, but I knew it wasn't great. I remember having to play it to Danny, and I think Danny said to me, he said, "John, it kind of sounds like a bad rock track." And I was heartbroken, but he was right. He was, it's what it was. It was a tired composer with a tired idea. And I thought, oh, God, what have I done? I've left the most important thing till I'm burnt out. And what am I going to do now? And I was panicking, So I was trying to write this big end, and I was coming up with things, and everything was just feeling tired, And then I remembered that I started going through all my sort of ideas, because every composer has like a pot of ideas in emergencies, So I started playing stuff over it and playing all kinds of different things, trying to get excited, trying to look at it a different way. I knew I didn't want to make it like a big zombie ending, which would, normally be quite syncopated and fast and frenetic. And I just didn't want to do that because, I'd done the whole score in what I thought was quite an original way, by like kind of not scoring a lot of the action scenes, but scoring the sort of bits of the film in between. So I scored it more like a road movie than a zombie film. And I remember feeling quite clever about that. I thought that's a classy, cool way to do it. So I was happy with the score up to that point. So I was looking for another way of doing this big 6 or 7 minute like zombie massacre thing at the end. I'm thinking there must be other ways of looking at this. I'm just not seeing it right. And I remember going through all my ideas, and I scrolled past this track, this song, and then I went past it, and then I went, well, hang on, let's go back. And then I went back to it, and I thought, well, that's a bit cool, but it's a bit weird. It starts with the little tiny piano thing, and then this acoustic guitar comes in. It's kind of the last track you'd ever imagine to be in a zombie film, never mind the big end finale. I mean, not that 28 Days is a zombie film, but it was in that kind of world, So then I sort of laid it up across the scene, and I didn't even fire it in properly. I just kind of played it from a point just to see. And as I was watching the end, and then the guitars come in, and then that weird arpeggio comes in, and then you've got it gets heavier, then the drums start coming in, and I was like, hang on, this is really cool. And then just at the right moment, all the big guitars smashed in, and I'm just watching this, and I'm just playing it going, oh my God, this could be great, And then it got right to the end, and the track stopped exactly at the point where Jim has got the axe with Selena. And he'd said earlier on to her, would you kill me if I was infected? And she said it early on in the film in a heartbeat. And the song just like pure luck, pure serendipity. It just went bang and it stopped. And she says in a heartbeat. And I was like, I've got it. This is it. If I just, play this to Danny as it is. I didn't even rework it. I just played the instrumental version. And I said, if he sees it like I'm seeing it, then we've got the end of the film, So Danny was coming to Liverpool the next day. Or I think I played him it over the phone or something. And he said, it sounds cool, but I need to see it to picture. So he was coming to Liverpool anyway the next day. He'd been in London or Manchester or something. So when he came and I went, just watch this. And I tried to fire it in around the same place. And he just loved it. He went, John, this is it. We got to do it like this. And I think I only made a few little tweaks to it in the middle. There was a moment where the young girl is hiding behind the mirror. I think I had to drop a few things out. But, other than that, that's how it went into the movie. And, I loved it because it was such a weird way to do that whole section of the film, that whole sequence. But Danny just thought it was cool because, the best thing about Danny, and it's why I got lucky on this, especially with that cue, is that he doesn't ever have any preconceived ideas of what he thinks the music should sound like. He knows exactly what it should feel like. So he was so open-minded. He was ready to listen to something that really was a bit off the wall for what you would expect at that point of that kind of movie. And, had that been some other director, they would have thrown that out after the first 20 seconds, because you've got these guys running around this house and soldiers and screaming and all these crazy faces and blood and everything, and you got this little tiny piano and a little strumming acoustic guitar. They'd have gone, "What are you playing me?" But because is who he is, and he would just watched it the whole way through, and he just had this big smile on his face, that he said, "Yeah, this has got to be it. You've cracked it." So another bit of good luck, really. And then obviously now it's kind of synonymous with that film, and it's become this thing of the modern zombie score and all that stuff. But yeah, again, it was just really pure luck. It just happened to fit perfectly, and that's how it worked. A lot of luck.
No, I like that. It's
I've probably ruined it for you now, haven't I?
No, not at all.
But I feel like it was always meant to be. Maybe it was a premonition, when I started doing it, that it was going to end up somewhere. But yeah, I hate to say it wasn't written for the movie. It was a song.
Not to keep talking about these cues that are, earworms, but in 2007, you did another Danny film, Sunshine. And like with 28 Days Later, you wrote, and maybe this was also another piece of music that you wrote before, or maybe it was for this.
I'm sorry to say it was, yeah.
So the specific cue that anybody that's, seen the film will be familiar with it. It's also gone on to be licensed countless times in advertising and movies and trailers. I guess let us know how that one came to be.
I feel like I'm just ruining the movies for so many people here. That was done quite a few years before. That was written when I lived in Liverpool still. And the idea for that was that I was really trying to write a trance track, if I'm honest. If I'm really honest, it was, I didn't set out to do that, but I remember I did this chord sequence and kept going around in my head, and I'd been out to Cream all night with a load of mates, and it was a long night, and I couldn't sleep, and I was just playing this thing round and round, but I could still kind of hear in my head, when you go to one of these, because, it was all dance music then in Liverpool. It was like everything was, was house music. And then everything was like four on the floor. And it was just that scene at the time, and I could kind of hear the kick drum in my head was just playing as I was writing this thing on the piano. And I remember the next day I sort of thought I should record that because that was quite good, whatever I did last night. So I had a little recorder, whatever I had in those days, and I sort of played out the whole sequence, And I was listening back, and I think, well, it's nice, but it felt vibey last night, And then I realised that what I was missing was this pum 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 pum, this big deep kick drum, this subby kick drum in my head. So I thought, well, that's going to sound weird when I actually, sort of demo it. But I demoed it up because I had a little Logic rig. But it was kind of cool, even though it was wrong. You got this incredibly slow piece of music, and you put this like bum 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 bum, sort of kick playing eights. Kind of ruined it, but it also made it vibey. But I spent a bit more time on that because I liked it a lot, and I thought that'll be great for something one day. And it wasn't the same situation because when I did Sunshine, I sort of presented this to Danny earlier, as being a, contender. I think I wrote two things, or I think I wrote something for that scene because it wasn't in the Kappa scene at the beginning. It was just in the where Kaneda dies, the whole sacrifice with Kaneda when he goes out, which is about, halfway through the movie. It was always my intention to sort of demo this up and show it to Danny because I really wanted it to be in the movie. But I thought I can't just give him something that I'd written years earlier. I need to write something bespoke for it too. So I sort of wrote something for it, which I thought was good, but it just didn't have the vibe of the Adagio track. And I played both versions to Danny because I was living in LA by then on Sunshine. And he, he instantly went with that version. And I had to say, Danny, look, this is not written for it. This was from a long time ago. He said, I don't care. Let's just do this and let's just put some things here. And, so we got a bit more involved with that one. But yeah, I mean, I'm afraid to say that was an early effort too. But it was his idea to try it over the scene at the end. He got excited with it and he went, well, why don't we try it over the other sacrifice moment at the end? And again, it was one of them things we just laid it up there and then. I just sort of dragged it into that bit of the film and we just hit it at a point. And we both just sat back going like, and he had that shot where you see him, this beautiful long shot as you see Kappa kind of moving, just flying through space from one ship to the other. And that was one of those few times where I felt that it was special because we both had that feeling of like, wow, because normally you don't know till something's finished whether you've done something good or not, but yeah, we both got that feeling that it was like going to be one of those moments, one of those film moments. So that was an easy call, that one. But that's how that was in Sunshine, yeah.
You kind of just answered my next question, but did you have any sense, when for both of those pieces of music that they would go on to like, have this life of their own afterwards?
I mean, I have such a weird taste in music. I think that, I sort of don't tend to like most things that most people like. And so me just liking something a lot doesn't mean anything to me. I never think that it's going to be the next big thing. I just think, it's one of those tracks that I love and people will be like, what? So when, for In the House, even though me and Danny were like, this is great, I didn't think for 1 second it would become what it did. But on the track that we used in Sunshine, that felt a moment where I thought, this is going to knock people's socks off, So not for the first one, but certainly the Sunshine one, I did feel, people are going to feel this.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it would become this big trailer track and all that kind of stuff. But, I did feel like people would get that one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. In 2010, you scored Kick-Ass, which is like I'd say the score is a mix of big orchestral cues and hybrid orchestral cues with modern instrumentation and electronic elements and guitar. Can you talk about your process for creating these, bigger sounding kind of hybrid scores? And if you start with something simple and then kind of build it out from there, or?
Yeah, I mean, for Kick-Ass, I tended to do all the really dirty punky stuff or the grungy stuff. And the really big orchestral stuff was mostly Henry, because he's great at that stuff, But, we would also mix and mash stuff up. He'd take one of my themes and run with that, or I'd take one of his themes and like do a dirty version of it. But, for the most part, I mean, I'm really old school, I mean, I like to start as simple as I can. So even with cues that become very big orchestral arrangements, I mean, I like to sort of start with a guitar and make something have an effect on me at its most simple, rawest level. So, if there's a guitar line or a chord sequence or a riff or something, if it's working on for me on guitar, just me sitting there playing it and I'm getting a kick out of it, then that's usually a good indicator that it's going to polish up well, and it's usually a good indicator that it's going to orchestrate well. Whereas whenever I try to go, okay, I'm doing a big orchestral cue here, and you get into that serious grown up headspace, I sort of write differently, and I kind of think I'm better when I start with guitar or just sitting at a piano and noodling around. I think the more original stuff tends to come from me sitting with a guitar or a piano, no matter how big it becomes. Just because I have to sell it to myself, I have to kind of sell any idea to myself and go, is this really got legs? Is this really original? Is this really that good? And the problem with, and again, I think it's a good thing for young composers. I think the problem with technology, it's amazing in most cases, but the problem with music technology is, you can turn your rig on and like have the hugest sound and brass and strings and everything and choir. You can hit your keyboard and have this huge big sound come out, which is great. But the problem with that is it kind of flatters to deceive, kind of fools you that you're doing great because it sounds huge. And I think, one of the problems with, film music, some film music in the last sort of 25 years has been, you know, it's all fireworks and not enough substance. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's not true of everybody, of course. I mean, there's been some unbelievable film music in the last 25 years, groundbreaking stuff. But, you hear some stuff sometimes and you go, where's the tune? If you break it down to a piano, what's really there? And I was always conscious of that if you go at these big orchestral stuff with all guns blazing, then there's always that danger that you just end up with a huge sounding thing that doesn't actually mean anything. Do you know what I mean? It sounds like it's big and it's huge and it sounds like it should be epic, but you just listen to it and if all you say when you hear a piece of music is it sounds big, then you've failed. You've kind of failed. So I was always, I try to remind myself not to do that. I mean, I do it sometimes. We all fall into the trap, but as a rule of thumb, I try to sell something to myself first, and I try to do it in its rawest form, because whatever happens, if you've got a good idea or a good riff or a good theme, you should be able to break it down to like the simplest version of itself, and it's still to mean something. So I try to do it that way. Not always, but that's how I try to do stuff.
So you've worked on, a long list of projects, and it's not possible to talk about everything. Is there a specific project that you're really proud of from your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, for me, the things that I'm proud of are not what some people would call the best scores, I think the stuff I'm proud of is the stuff that was, the more original stuff, like the 28 Days, or like Sunshine, which was, I sort of went at it I went at it trying not to do a space score, and trying to do it in a more ambient and sort of organic way. So yeah, I mean, 28 Days, Sunshine. I thought Lock, Stock was cool. Kick-Ass was loads of fun. There's some good stuff in there. Last House on the Left, I was pleased with that, even though it was a very stylized score, and that I was trying to get back to the sensibility of the very original horror films, the great early 70s stuff. I'm really happy with some of the stuff in there. And I've just done the Suicide Squad with James Gunn. And, that's just fresh. I'm still fresh with that, but I'm really proud of that one. I think, I think that was very different to how a lot of those kind of superhero scores are done. I don't know how it'll go down yet. It's not out till August. But the movie's fantastic. I mean, I can't say too much about it, but I can say that it's fantastic. But, I'm very proud of the score on that. I think it really worked. What else? I think that might be the only ones I'm proud of. It's not a good batting average, really, is it? But they're the ones for me that stick out. Yeah, I mean, anything where I get to do something where I feel like it's me and not, just writing a load of music because the director wants it to be a certain way. You never zone out when you're doing that stuff, but there's a point where you go, oh, I'm just, I'm servicing them here. I'm not like, it's not a collaboration. I'm just doing, there's always films like that, but I love the films where I feel like I've collaborated with the director and they've had a big input and we've done something that, is a little bit fresh or a little bit different. They're the ones that stick out for me for sure.
How much of this business would you say is luck and how much is hard work?
I think you need both, to be honest. I mean, I got a lucky break with the first film and I got a lucky break with, with Lock, Stock. That kind of put me on the map a little bit. But, none of those lucky breaks would have meant anything if I didn't work my ass off from the get-go with it and throw everything at it. I think you've got to be really passionate. You've got to really be so passionate to make it work. So I think both. I think both things are like really important. I mean, you need to have your break, but you need to know when that break is going to come to. So you've got to be aware, and you've got to look out. You've got to know that there's going to be moments where this could be the one, and you've got to sort of keep the faith. You've got to not lose hope, and you've got to go. I did a great job on that, but the film didn't do well. So just keep going. You'll get a chance, and just just work as hard as you can when the chance comes.
What does an average workday look like for you today?
Today, well, I'm about to start another project this week, in fact. So today I'm just kind of wrapping things up and psyching myself up for it and, clearing the decks. But, normally on a work day, I'll get up as early as I can, just try and get my head into what I've got to do. I'm a big planner. I like to know what I'm doing before I start, and I'll figure out the, what I need to achieve that day. And then, just pick up with whatever I've been working on and try and stick to a schedule as best I can. And then just because the minute you sit down in the chair, then time disappears, and you it becomes all about sort of pushing yourself. So I try to be organized before I sit in the chair, because once I sit there and I'm there and it's music time, then all of us, we go into a different headspace. So I try to get the organizing done in the morning, and then just run at it for the rest of the day, and hope the good stuff comes.
You've already given, some good advice, but to end the podcast, what advice would you offer to any aspiring composers who want to build a career in film or TV music?
I think the only advice I can give is what we've talked about, which is, learn everything you can. Be passionate about it, because it's not an easy job. People think it's a very glamorous job. It's not glamorous at all, but it's unbelievably rewarding. When you write something, when you watch a scene with no music and you're following it, you can see the story and you can see this, and then you think, okay, what am I going to do? And you got a blank page every time. When you break through that barrier and you suddenly have that moment where you've worked out how to make that scene better, or how to make that scene function within the whole story, and then you do it, and you watch that same scene again, and you realize for that moment you've made that movie better. That's like one of the best feelings you can have, So it's worth it. It's so worth it, but it's not an easy job, It's one of them, you're going to work hard, but it's going to be rewarding for you. But you've got to be prepared to work hard. If you can be passionate and do that, then you got a chance. And aside from that, the very best advice is just like I was saying earlier, try to be yourself as much as you can. Sometimes you won't get the chance, and you've got to do something that's maybe a bit more generic, or a little bit more what the director wants, and you might not agree with, but there will always be moments where you get a chance to do, even if it's a few scenes, to do it in your own way. To just try and find out, because there's always more than one way to score a scene, and it may not be what they're asking you to do in that way, but there's always a way to make a scene work that hasn't been done before. So you've always got to be looking for those moments. Oh, is this one of them scenes where, I can put a bit more of me into this, or I can do something in a way that maybe nobody's ever done before. Those scenes will always come about, and eventually you'll get to be working with directors who've got enough trust to let you do a whole score that way. And then that's when you're really standing out on your own, because nobody wants copies of the big guys, for me, I've seen it happen so many times. The only films that I ever got hired on were the films where I felt like I was doing my own thing. No one has ever hired me for anything where I felt like I've done something generic. It's always been the films where I've done something that is a little bit different. So, work hard, be passionate, try to put yourself into everything that you do, and then hope you get a bit of luck on the way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Music Dialogue. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you download podcasts. The opening and end music used in this episode was composed by William Ryan Fritch. You can hear more of his music at williamryanfritch.com. Follow us on Instagram at Music Dialogue. We'll see you next time.